Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Jazz or V, whatever you like to call me. I hope you're doing well. Today we will be talking about all the books I've read in February. I can't believe it's already March. I feel this year is going fast. It's going rapidly. Spring is coming. I don't know. Do you like spring? My birthday's coming up, so that's kind of exciting. My birthday's in April. February is the shortest month of the year, so I also read a little less books than I maybe usually would. Actually, it's like totally fine. I feel I've been reading too much, if we want to say it like that, but just like been reading a lot lately. And I already notice now I'm kind of experiencing a bit of a reading slump. It's not that easy for me to finish a story at the moment, but we'll see how it will go. Anyways, enough yapping about how things are going. Let's get right into the books that I read in February. But before we get there, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I'm very happy about everyone subscribing. And yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so I started the month with books I was still reading from the month before. I got sick in the end of January, and then I couldn't read while I was sick. I was sick in the beginning of February as well. And yeah, I just tried to read on my e-reader the books I've had already started in January. And the first one I finished was Bloodchild and Other Stories by Octavia E. Butler. Of course, the Octavia E. Butler challenge is ongoing. Read 2 books for it in February, and the first one is that one. Now, for this book, I have already read Bloodchild over a year ago now, only Bloodchild as a standalone short story. And so this time I just read the other stories in this book. And I read this book as an ebook, and it was indeed the first 5-star read of the year, which is exciting. I'm so happy, and I'm also like happy that it was an Octavia book to get that first 5-star. And yeah, let me tell you all about it. So in this short story collection, we also have 2 essays, and it's a collection of short stories that Octavia has released during her lifetime. And of course, Bloodchild is her award-winning short story that won her a bunch of awards. I think the Nebula Award and the Locus Award too. So she's like, you know, that story was very big, and I already rated that story 5 stars when I read it on its own. To the book as a whole, I don't even know how many short stories there are. It's a few, and all of them have an author's note, which is really nice. I love reading author's notes, like reading about the thoughts that went into the story. To be honest, the author's note on Bloodchild was the reason I wanted to read all of Octavia's work, because I read that author's note, I still remember it, and I was like, this lady is so cool. I need to become her best friend. And then I googled her, and yeah, she died 20 years ago, so can't really be her best friend anymore, but then I can read all her books, right? So that's what I'm doing now. I also mentioned this short story collection in my video about books that radicalized me. You can check that out. I'll link it down below, because there is a strong underlying political theme in every single one of her short stories. It's a lot about oppression and fighting oppression. And I also felt that these stories all truly show how Octavia incorporated her own life experience into her own stories. The more I read from her, the more I recognize her in her own stories. I've read 2 biographies of hers, and now that I know that much about her, reading short stories that she wrote, I really can tell, like, oh, that's a reference to this thing that happened to her, or that's a reference to her relationship with her religion, or that's a reference to her growing up in the 50s, 60s, 70s in the USA and having to deal with that. It was very, very interesting. I could also recognize the relationship she had with her mother in her stories, and obviously also with her father. And it's very, yeah, there's a lot of her in these short stories. I also felt there's like this common theme in all of these short stories, but also in all of her writing in general that I've read so far, that there is a strong hope for a better tomorrow. So she often writes dystopia, right? Our main character is not supposed to be the hero of the story. Our main character is usually an underdog, is usually a woman that is being treated badly because of multiple different reasons. And all of Octavia's stories carry this, but there might be a better tomorrow. And I find that very admirable. I also feel there's a strong theme of humanity, of human connection, and of love for one another, and of fighting for each other, of solidarity in her stories, which I resonate to a lot. And I really find it extremely empowering to read such hopeful works, especially because she writes a lot of her works in a dystopian setting. It's very interesting to read this hopeful approach. So to me, it's very clear that Octavia believes in the good in humans, no matter how bleak the world is. There were 3 short stories that stood out to me that I quickly want to talk about. The first one is Amnesty. And in Amnesty, our main character goes through hell and back, literally. And I really loved how Octavia showed how this character, even though she experienced the worst, still has so much love and kindness and compassion for other humans, even though it was the humans that treated her really, really badly. And that really struck me and stuck with me. And then there was a similar theme in Speech Sounds, which I also found very interesting. There it was a dystopian setting where you're not allowed to talk. Well, you're not supposed to talk. And that there was also this whole thing about compassion and having feelings for people just because there are people too. And that was really touching for me. And then the last story that really struck with me is the final one that is in this book. And it's called The Book of Martha. And it is her approach on utopia. We have a woman who meets God, and God asks her, what is the one thing you would change about humans to make this world a better place? And I found it so genius how Octavia approached this question and answered it with that story. And then also her author's note was really resonated so much with me about the whole utopia dystopia discourse and about how someone's utopia could be someone else's dystopia. So yeah, I've had a lot to say about this one. 5-star read for a reason. I really liked it. Every single story was so good and the overall themes were so strong, and yeah, loved it. Now, the second book I read was also by Octavia E. Butler, and I read another short story collection, however, a lot shorter. I read Unexpected Stories by her. There are 2 short stories in this book, and they were published posthumous, so after she died. So it wasn't her who decided that they are ready for publishing. I also read it as an ebook, and I rated it 3 stars. Now, the 2 stories in there, the first one is called A Necessary Being, which is on a planet we don't know, and with beings we don't know. It has very much a fantasy element to it, and it touches upon themes of breaking tradition, of kinship, of sacrificing, and also of, doing what is necessary for the greater good of your people. It's very much about community as well. And the second story is called Child Finder, and that again is set in our world as a dystopia. And for me, it was just both stories, I liked them. I liked A Necessary Being quite a lot. Actually, it was also a lot longer than Child Finder. I think Child Finder would probably have been refined more if Octavia would have worked more on it, I think. But, I don't know. Maybe she was, maybe that was it for her. And I felt compared, because I had the back-to-back comparisons from Bloodchild and Other Stories to Unexpected Stories, there was a big difference in the quality for me as well, which is also why I rated it quite a bit lower, because I just felt like we have that often with posthumous books, right? That they're not as good as the ones that were published when the author was still alive. And that is because there is a reason the author hasn't published them yet, and they were not unfinished stories. So it's not that she was still working on them officially, it's just that she hasn't published them. So yeah, that's Unexpected Stories, 3 stars from me. Now, next up, let's move into the small pile of physical books I read this month. The first book I read physically this month is called Dienstag, Homobar, which is a German indie lesbian fiction book. And well, it surprised me. I rated it 4 stars, and there's no English translation. There's no translation at all of this book. It's really an indie book. You can only find it on Amazon, I think. I found my copy at the secondhand bookstore. The secondhand bookstore has a queer section. I looked at the queer section. I read the title. I flipped it around, and it said lesbian fiction. And I was like, why not just grab it for $3? Let's go. I need a lesbian book. I want to read it. And that's how it ended up on my shelf. And why I read it this month, because I was just like, oh, I need something to read. Why not read that? And it was a surprisingly good read. So in this story, we follow our main girl, Robin, as she navigates the Berlin nightlife, especially as she goes to this one bar where she goes to every single Tuesday with her best friend Kato. And that's where she meets a girl named Karina and falls in love with her. Well, the only problem is Karina is the ex-girlfriend of Robin's best friend. Yes, it's a romance. I usually don't really love romance, or I'm usually disappointed by romance. However, in this book, well, there is clearly a romance between Robin and Karina. The focus is mainly on the relationship between Robin and her best friend. So it's way more examination of that best friendship rather than the romantic relationship. And I really appreciated that, because it really looked at how relationships can look like, what codependency can look like, how toxic structures kind of just become the norm, and how to also break out of them, and how hard it is to break out of something that you depended on so much but was so bad for you for such a long time. And I really loved that about it. I also liked how unapologetically lesbian this book was. It was so gay. They were being so gay. It's like, it was just a whole thing. And I felt it gave a nice glimpse into the lesbian clubbing subculture in Berlin. It was very interesting. I'm really curious, like, you know, is it still like this? Because it obviously doesn't play in 2026. And you can tell that the author has like lived in this situation and like knows what's going on. So yeah, that book was a surprisingly good read. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. Then the next book I also read as an ebook, and that was my bedtime read. I read it every night in bed, and it was the 4th book of the Night Huntress series, and the title is Destined for an Early Grave by Jeaniene Frost. Yeah, now the rating, I'm actually not even sure what I want to rate it. I'm at 1 to 2 stars. Because I'm really, like, that's where I need a 1.5 star. Because it wasn't completely, like, the worst ever, but it was also very bad. Like, for me, in my subjective opinion, this book was bad. And I can't even tell you, like, too much on why, because it's the 4th book of a series. The series overall, it's a romance series between our half vampire huntress, Kat is her name, Katrin, and the vampire she fell in love with called Bones. And there were just so many issues. I've already had issues before. I've mainly had issues with the gender dynamics in it, and in the last book I ranted in January about like that best friend situation that was just really toxic, and how men just don't respect boundaries in this book. And now it got worse. So first of all, that aspect got worse, but then also the storytelling, it just made no sense. I'm really sorry to say that, but for me it felt like the author had a plan for the first 3 books and then decided to like write the 4th book, which should have been hinted at. Like, the things happening in the 4th book should have been somehow hinted at in the first 3 books, because it all is like about like things that happened in the past, and we just had nothing about it. There's this whole possessiveness to it about like you're mine and you're not allowed to do that because you belong to me. Like this men possessing women, which is then legitimized with vampire law, which I just find so gross, problematic, disgusting, uncool, and I just really, yeah. There's also a weird situation about like when Kat was a minor, which I just, yeah, which nobody talks about. Like, that's what blows my mind, is like that this is not even addressed. It's not even considered that this could be like resolving our situation if we would just like look at the fact that she was a minor when something big happened that is important to this plot. And then also their relationship was just not going well. This book, like their communication was worse than ever, which resulted in, you know, whatever happens when you don't communicate. There was extreme jealousy that was not addressed between them. They were both just like assuming that the other one is doing things that they weren't doing and keeping secrets from each other. And I just, put it away. And yeah, it's part of a series. I don't know, should I DNF the series? Like, what do you think? If I'm rating this, I think I'm gonna give it a 1 star. Now that I've like reflected on camera on it, I think it will be a 1 star. Should I DNF the series? Is there hope? Like, if we look at it, I gave the first book 3 stars, the second book 2 stars, the third book 3 stars, and this one a 1 star. It was always like, you know, it was good and it got worse. It was good and I got really bad. Maybe it's gonna get good again. I don't know. But yeah, that's The Night Huntress book 4. No, thank you. Not even thank you next. Just like piss off. Like, no. All right, next up in better news, I read another book physically and I loved it. I loved it so much. Let me tell you all about it. So I read Heaven Official's Blessing book 1. Okay. Oh, and it was so good. I gave it 4 stars. I love it. I love it. I love it. Let me tell you. Let me tell you. So I have a history with Heaven Official's Blessing. I don't know, when was it? We have 2026, 5-6 years ago. Yeah, I kind of got into MXTX stories through the animation of Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, and then obviously also got into Heaven Official's Blessing. I've watched the animated adaptations of both of these, and then also I watched the Untamed, of course, and I was in the fandom of like both of them, not like really into it. I've been in fandoms like for real, like, you know, I have my dedicated Twitter accounts to the fandoms I'm in and stuff like that. That wasn't the case for Heaven Official's Blessing or Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, but I was like, you know, aware of what's going on. I was enjoying the artworks and the fanfics, you know how it is. And back then, I started reading the Heaven Official's Blessing books, and that was before the official translation was released. So what I did was I read all of book 1 for the fan translation. Now, book 1 from the fan translation is the first 1.5 books of the official translation. And then the official translation was released, obviously, and I supported from the get-go. So I actually pre-ordered all 3 series that were translated back then. I pre-ordered the first book, and then for Heaven Official's Blessing, I got the first 3 books before I stopped pre-ordering them. So that means I have 3 of those books. And yeah, something in February 2026 told me, you should be getting back into that. And oh, do I have 0 regrets. I don't know, maybe I saw on YouTube a clip, or maybe on my Twitter I saw a picture of them or something, but my brain was like, oh, Heaven Official's Blessing. And that's why I read again. It's a reread for me, but it's the first time reading the official translation, and it was just so amazing. Now, if you don't know anything about Heaven Official's Blessing, it's Boys Love from China, and it has an animation adaptation. It would have a live action adaptation, however, the live action has not been released. It's been filmed for 4 years now, and it hasn't been released because of the Chinese censorship laws. You know, you can do with that what you want. The books are banned in China, and the author, it's been rumored that she's been to jail for writing what she writes, just because she's writing men loving each other. And the story is about our main guy, Xiang, who is a god, and he's ascended into godhood for the 3rd time, which means he was banished from the heavens 2 times already. We will get into that in later books, but in the first book, we are focusing on his adventures now that he's ascended for the 3rd time. He is called the Scrap Immortal because he has spent many years collecting scrap. He has no worshippers, no temples, and yeah, he goes back down to Earth to build his own temple. That's what he decides to do, and that's kind of how we get into this story. And overall, it's a romance. Like, if you're gonna read all 8 books, there's a romance, of course, but in book 1, there's of course not yet. It's a slow burn. There's yearning. Like, it's a slow burn. And yeah, it was so entertaining. I love the Chinese humor. I just think it's so fun. I also really love the footnotes by the translators that tell us about like certain Chinese writing that means certain things and how this like works as a proverb. I really like that. And I just was really happy to be back, and it just felt so nice and cozy and fun. And of course, the story is not an easy one. It's not a light story. How could it be? But yeah, it was just really nice to be back, and I had a wonderful time. I really love it. And I will be reading the second one in March. I've decided that. My plan is to read them swiftly, mainly because it's a series where I already know a lot of the bigger plot points and where the story is supposed to be going. And also because it's just so nostalgic for me. Like, I'm just excited to read the whole series for the first time once. So yeah, 4 stars for Heaven Official's Blessing Part 1. And you'll hear my thoughts on part 2 in the March wrap-up. And finally, we are coming to the last book I read this month, which was a classic. I've been trying to read a classic each month if I can. This month, one was calling to me. I read The Overcoat by Nikolai Gogol, a Ukrainian author who wrote in the 1800s. And it's my second Gogol story I read. I plan on reading a third one in March. We'll see if I'll get to it. And it's a short story. I think it was like 30 pages. Yeah. So I was a bit skeptical because I read The Nose by Gogol, and that's a wild story. That's a really wild story. That's a wild story there. And so I was like, oh yeah, will I have an easy time reading The Overcoat? And I actually enjoyed it a lot. I rated it 4 stars. I just really liked the themes that Gogol decides to touch upon in his stories. So they play there's the second one that plays in St. Petersburg. I don't know if all his stories play there, and in Russia under the Tsar still. And he very much in this story touches upon poverty a lot, and class and status, which I like. I like books that like talk about class. And poverty is like a big one on like how, working but not being able to make a living wage. And also it talks about civil servants, like how ridiculous their situation was in Russia. It's definitely a satire on that too. He used to work as a civil servant, just so you know, and I feel he probably made a lot of experiences back then, and he wrote about them in these kind of satirical stories, like poking fun of all like the rules and all of the hierarchies in there that make no sense, and how they treat each other with certain exaggeration. Just because you have a title, you suddenly like need to be bowed to 25 times before someone can speak to you, and like these kinds of things, which is very extra. I really liked it. So the story is about an employee, a civil servant, and it's winter in St. Petersburg and it's really cold, and he needs a new jacket and he can't afford it, and how he goes about getting that money and then what happens afterward. It's a tragic story too, just want to say, and really short. And yeah, I liked it. I'm definitely looking forward to reading another Gogol. The next one I plan on reading is Diaries of a Madman. Let's see how this will go. That's the final book I read in February, The Overcoat by Nikolai Gogol. All right, this brings us to the end of this wrap-up for the month of February. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe and leave me a comment. What was your favorite read of February? Did you have one? My favorite read was Bloodchild and Other Stories by Octavia E. Butler, my first 5-star read of the year. And I will see you next week. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you a good week, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.